And we're live.
If I get into a fight with LeBron James, how many games am I going to get suspended for? Just a question.
I want to see what your face is going to look like.
It's just a question. I've been hit in the head so many times. It's just a question. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you right now. Just know that you are locked in until the point with
Skip
and the King. You guys go down there, click subscribe, click like, leave some comments. If you ain't watching on YouTube, you're bootlegging, you owe us some money. But today we have the one and only Kenyon. My man, I've seen your posts, man. Is there any way anybody out there can find you?
Right now I like to be unfound, but the hopeful Canadian is kind of my inactive but soon to be active social media handle. So hopeful Canadian.
Well, thank you for coming on today. It was a pleasure that we actually connected to get to do this, because this is going to be a great conversation, ladies and gentlemen. So Kenyon, let's start with this. This past week, the fifth week of the Toronto Raptors in this season, and they're at 1-2. You know, they're not doing too good, but they did also play Golden State, which was a good game. I thought they did really well. What can you take away from this past week from the Toronto Raptors?
Exactly. So again, to recap the past little bit, the past three games, the Raptors went into Utah. They lost their funk to the Jazz. They were crowned kings of Sacktown. And then they went up against the Dubs and took an L. So
nice.
Simply put, it's been a rough West Coast road trip. But the real question is, what can we really glean from the past three games? And so to me, I think that there's a couple things. First thing is,
such as?
The first thing is that I've noticed Scottie Barnes might be hitting a little bit of the rookie wall. I mean, he played, I think, around 592 minutes of total basketball last year, versus he's played over 550 in a month this year. So that's probably the first thing. I'm not too worried. I think he'll get his energy back up. I think the second thing that I noticed throughout this road trip, and maybe a little bit before, is the fourth quarter execution, or maybe even the second half execution, has been really killing this team. I look at the Warriors, we were 27-27, but the game was already done. Sacramento 23-12, and Jazz 27-23. So
these are the
come on, that game was a wash.
These are the fourth quarter scores, right?
These are the fourth quarter scores, yeah.
And the Raptors lost all three, or they lost two of the three, I should say.
They lost two of the three.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end of the day, I put it this way. Masai said that there were going to be growing pains. These are some of the growing pains. There are some bright spots. Kem Birch came back to the starting lineup. Precious Achua was back from injury. And last but not least, Birch got the second charge of the year. So I think that those are all bright spots to me.
Okay, Skip, based on what Kenyon just said, when he just skimmed on the starters, how do you feel about the starters for these last three games? Do you have hope? Do you have faith? Or is it make a change?
Okay, so first of all, I think we should look back at this week and see we went 1-2 and maybe not panic too much, because if you think about it, it kind of brings me back to, there was a game like maybe 3 years ago where Rick Carlisle came in with the Mavericks to Toronto and played, and this was when the Raptors were pretty good. I think they'd made an Eastern Conference Finals already, or were about to, and the Raptors just beat the Mavericks. And after the game, Rick Carlisle came out and he like ripped his team. He's like, "We were terrible, we were brutal." And everyone on the Raptors side was looking around like, did no one tell Rick Carlisle like the Raptors are good? Like this is not the Kings that he lost to. This is not like the Timberwolves. So I think some of the panic on Raptors Twitter is kind of emblematic of that, where it's like, yeah, we lost to Golden State. Golden State's 14-2. They're amazing. We lost to Utah.
They're the best team in the league.
Yeah, Utah is a serious contender. They were at home. Obviously, I think we had the rest advantage in that game, if I'm not mistaken. But still, like Utah's a really good team. I don't think we should stress too much about losing to them. And the Kings, I mean, that's just the flip side. Like the Kings are just a disaster. Obviously, lost to us, lost to somebody else. Someone pukes on the court.
Thompson.
Luke Walton's out the door, and I think they got blown out in their first game after Luke Walton left too. So the Kings are just a mess. So like, yeah, that was an easy win. So we're just playing chalk right now. We're not really surprising anybody. We're not doing anything unexpected. Obviously, it was a bit of a rough week. But you asked me about the starters, so I think
get to it.
This is kind of the thing, right? Because this is continuing the trend of Siakam coming back and the Raptors not performing as well with Siakam in the lineup. Now, obviously, he had the nuclear game against the Kings, just unbelievable numbers. What was it? 32 on 12 shots, I think. 32 points on 12 shots against the Kings. But then you look against the Jazz, he was absolutely awful in that game. He was a disaster in that game. And then against the Warriors, he was back to kind of his normal self, like not amazing, not terrible, but wasn't really impacting the bottom line of the scoreboard too much. But obviously the thing with Pascal, and we've been talking about it ever since he came back, what's happening to Scottie Barnes with Pascal in the lineup? And you look at these 2 games.
We're going to go through this again?
No, we're just going to touch on it quickly. Like, okay, so 3 games. He gets 11 shots versus Golden State. But remember, he had 0 points in the first half. So most of that was in the second half when the game was out of hand. He had 8 shots against Sacramento, 2 points on 8 shots against Sacramento in a game the Raptors massacred in. And then he had 11 shots against Utah, 10 points on 11 shots. So this is the thing. Before Pascal came back, Scottie was getting high usage. He was getting really involved in how the team was running their offense. He was running plays. He was doing a lot of stuff, and he's not really doing it as much now. Against Sacramento, he's just standing out, waiting in the corner. Against Golden State, he's rebounding. Like that's all he's doing. For the first half of the game, all he was a glorified rebounder. You mentioned that it might be the rookie wall. I think there's a few different reasons that it could be. One is just straight up usage. Like obviously Pascal is stealing his usage. One is maybe with OG out of the lineup, he's being forced to play against some centers. He's playing a lot more big man at this point. Maybe that's kind of throwing a wrench in his game. Maybe it's just, that rookie wall, maybe a bit of a slump. Maybe it's chemistry issues. I think there's definitely questions about the chemistry of the starting unit on this team. But yeah, that's going to be the thing to watch, is how Pascal and Scottie can coexist. Obviously, you go down the rest of the starters. Birch has had amazing moments, but man, Birch he's not a superstar. He's just a guy. Like it's really nice. Yep.
What about the rest of the starters?
I'm getting to that.
As a collective. As a collective.
So Birch,
we've been harping on Scottie for a while. So what about the starting lineup?
That's why I'm talking about Birch now. Anyway, so Birch has been. You saw him really hustling against Golden State, really getting in there, rebounding, but he's not a high level NBA center. He's just a guy who can play his role. I think Gary Trent, he is what he is. Again, a guy who can play his role. He's going to take a million shots. Sometimes he's going to make them. Sometimes he's not. They need his spacing out there. Sometimes he makes the shots. And when he makes the shots, they roll. And when the shots aren't there, it's a bit tough sledding. And then, of course, Freddie. I mean, this has been a topic that people have been talking about all season long. Dominating the ball. Sometimes it goes well. Sometimes he's the best player on the floor. Sometimes you're like, man, just get rid of it. Let someone else do something. So I think this week was just more of Freddie being Freddie. Freddie trying to be the leader of this team, and it's sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's you got to shake your head a little bit and wonder. Anyway, so that's the starting unit, obviously with OG out of the lineup.
Okay, Skip. Now both of you guys, I got to say, based on what you said, Kenyon, about them showing up in the fourth quarter and Skip talking about the starters, right? Now, who carries you there? I actually wanted to talk about the bench, which has been, you guys know, out there, it's been my theme for the year. I want to see the bench thrive. I want to see them do great. But Nick Nurse keeping it really tight for the starters, who have been leading the other starters in a good few categories against the other starters. Now the bench versus the other team's bench, man, it's not looking good. Like the Raps are minus 36 on points in the last 3 games out of 86. You know, they're getting more boards, less assists, which I'm not too happy about, less steals, which I'm not too happy about because that generates defense. Field goals, they've been shooting all right, but the three-pointers, they're not even close to the other teams. And this is the question I have to ask you guys is, based on what the starters and the bench can do, and like you said, Kenyon, with the fourth quarter, and Skip, you and I have alluded to on Prob's show. By the way, guys, go check that out, the Warwick Report. We did talk about what's your closing lineup. Now, the starters can do what they can for the first quarter. The bench can do what they can for the second and third, but who's going to take into the fourth? Like, is this a discrepancy between the bench, the starters, Nick Nurse? And that's what I want to ask you, Kenyon. What do you think about this?
That's a good question. So I think, first of all, I've noticed that sometimes, and I'm going to exclude games where foul trouble has been an issue.
Yes. No, I hate the refs.
Yeah. Scottie Barnes has sometimes, and as well as the other starters, Nurse has kept him on the bench a little bit too long in the fourth. Usually comes in around, I would say, the 5.5 minute mark. And I'm looking at the 7 minute mark and I'm saying, can we get this kid back in the game? So
well, I thought it was interesting how he ran that one. Which game was it? Where he ran? Was it the Sacramento game where he ran Scottie and Gary Trent with the bench unit in the first half? And they won that game. So it must have been the Sac game. And they just kind of turned it on and went nuclear. And that was really exciting to see that. And it was kind of like it sort of showed you how maybe these guys can excel in a different role in the bench. And that's why Brian, you're kind of measuring starting numbers versus bench numbers, but it's always going to be a little bit all over the place.
Hey, I love the bench. I want to see the bench do well. You need a bench to win.
You could say the Raptors starters have outplayed their opponents, but most of that was in the Sacramento game. How much of that was due to just them playing more minutes than other team starters? That's always a concern with this team. So I think it's not really about starters versus bench. It's how you maximize your roster. And I think Nick Nurse is starting to find some little clues about how he might want to go about that. But we're still a long way from sorting it out. And that's the ongoing question of the season is how to maximize these guys, because there's a lot of good players on this team. And how do you get them to play as a unit?
Kenyon, how would you maximize the players that you currently have on the team if you were Nick Nurse?
Well,
for Nick Nurse. Yeah. You might have to get some surgery, like some of the color.
Yeah, exactly. I need the NN hat.
Michael Jackson.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. The melatonin.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I would probably focus on is I think Precious works on the bench. So that he made a good switch there. I think we were waiting a little bit for Birch to be healthy because Birch missed huge parts of training camp with COVID, and then he's had knee swelling. We have kind of been working at maybe half of a center for the whole season, which is better than last season.
Two whole seasons. Yeah.
Better than last season, but it's not by much. I think Precious on the bench helps because to me the bench really has a good identity of, I call it the chaos unit. Because, it really is how the Raptors like to play. They really like to play that. I think Skip called it a high wire act. I say it's a very helter-skelter, frenetic, kind of funky type style. And I think that...
Go big or go home, baby.
I thought they backed off of that a little bit after the Utah game. In the Utah game, they were doing that like crazy, and it was just Gobert would just get an open dunk every time, or Ingles would get an open three, or someone would get an open three. And I think after that game, they kind of realized, all right, we got to back off this. We could throw it. That defense is a curveball. It's not your fastball down the middle. If that's your fastball down the middle, NBA players are going to pick it apart. If you throw it at them and they're not ready for it, then that's when you're causing havoc. Anyway,
Skip, baseball season's over, man. Let it go. Let it go. I know you're hurt.
I'm just saying.
Let it go.
It's okay. We're all hurt by that one. So. One game.
Yeah.
But yeah,
hey guys. Yeah. So I gotta ask you guys. Before we get out of here, I gotta ask you guys. So based on everything the Raptors have put on the floor, do you see a positive from this past week from what they've shown, because I'm pretty stoked about the way they played against Golden State. They took the same amount of field goals, but they were down on 3-pointers. That was basically the difference in the whole game. And I think that they can hang a big-time team like that.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. It is a big difference. But you know what? It was like they were only down 7-3.
Just kidding.
7-3. No, 7-3.
That is 20 points, right? Like
7 threes and 8 free throws. That was basically the game because they hit the same amount of field goals, right? So that was basically the game, and they could hang with them. So do you guys see some positives, like them going forward now? Like
I do.
Next, Memphis.
We play Memphis twice in the next week.
Yeah, so Justin Timberlake's going to sit in the 7th row. Meanwhile, when they come back to Toronto, you know, your ambassador is going to be sitting on the corner going, look at me, look at me. Anyway, I'm not even going to get into that. But how do you guys see the Raptors going forward based on this past week? Because it looks pretty positive playing against Utah, winning against a crappy team, and then hanging in there with Golden State. What do you guys think?
So I'll add the fact that Utah is a little bit above sea level than Toronto, so that also it has a similar advantage to Denver. So I will also add that. But yeah, I agree. I saw a lot of positives. I think that they are still creating a lot of turnovers. I think Nurse knows that, you know, whether people want to admit it or not, Pascal Siakam is important for half-court offense purposes. I think we have guys like Delano Banton and other people that are better in transition. Most of our team is a transition team. I think it's something like 19% of our possessions we run because that is your transition offense, and that's number one in the NBA.
That's the whole team is built on.
Exactly. So we are able, because of that, to create more turnovers. What we need to focus on now, although it is a young team, is transition execution.
I think, yeah. I mean, that's a factor, but eventually this team is going to have to learn how to play regular basketball too. Like, like transition basketball is great. Like, yeah, they thrive in transition. They're a young team. They're a fast team. They do a lot of good things in transition, and they could finish a little better, obviously. But eventually, you're going to have to figure out how to beat teams one-on-one, like how to come up to them on their terms and beat them on their terms. And that's the next step for this team. When the transition game isn't there, what else do you have in your back pocket? And that's what I don't think we know yet. I think this week, like, I'm not panicking after this week, but I'm not especially bullish either. Like, I'm kind of like, yeah, they're an average team. I don't think they're terrible. I don't think they're great. I think the Memphis game will be a great measure. The 2 Memphis games you said will be a great measuring stick, because Memphis is a really exciting team, but they're a team you could beat if you're playing right. And I think going forward, this is going to be a bit of a disappointing month, but we knew this was going to be a bumpy season. I don't think anyone expected them to be a top 4 seed in the East. If they can continue to grow,
fourth to play in, right?
Yeah, if they can continue to grow through this stretch, like, yeah, we'll see where they're at the end of the year. So, yeah, this is just what this year is.
Hey, don't forget, Utah might be returning tonight. So,
Utah?
You know.
Oh, Utah. What's tonight? Yeah. They're talking about
the
No,
guy.
Yeah, no, not the city. Not the city. Not the city.
My man, yo, Utah is my
obviously they played this whole week without OG, and we haven't mentioned his name once. So
yep, and he is potentially going to return. I mean, you know how Nurse is with his lineups. He'll say one thing, another thing will happen. But apparently, you know, he was upgraded to questionable, which we thought he was going to be out with a hip pointer for 3 to 4 weeks. So maybe this guy's like Wolverine. I don't know.
Oh, geez. Hugh Jackman as Logan. Okay, so guys, based on this upcoming week, the Raps have 4 games. They're playing Memphis twice. They're playing Indiana, and they're playing is it Boston?
I don't have the schedule open.
I believe
it is Boston. It is Boston. It's a Toronto. It's right here in our city. So out of these 4 games, guys, do you guys want to be like Robert and be like Robert Damas or Nostradamus and come up with a record? Just give me a record. Give me a number out of these 4 games.
Sorry, you said 2 Memphis, 1 Indy, 1 Boston?
Yep.
I think they take the Boston game. I think they take Indiana. I think they split the Memphis. So 2-2.
3-1.
You said 3-1.
Right. Sorry.
I'm going to say 2-2. I'm going to say 2-2. I think they split the Memphis. I think they beat one of Boston or Indiana, but I'm not sure which one.
Boston's here at home, so I think they might lose because these guys ain't been doing good at home right now.
Like, I think I like them to beat Indiana more, but I think Indiana has more revenge to get on us. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I'm going to go 2-2. However it comes about. 2-2.
Kenyon, you got 3-1.
Yeah. Well, again, Boston, Indiana, and we'll see about Memphis. We'll see about Memphis.
Yeah.
So if they get one, that's 3-1, bro.
You know what? I'm optimistic. Hopeful Canadian.
If they go,
hey,
if they
you know
go
what?
0-4,
you want to go optimistic? I'll say 4-0. I'll say 4-0.
There we go.
Okay. If you guys, and I'm the only one out of the three of us that's not a Raptors fan.
All right.
Right.
He says with all the jerseys behind him.
I know, right?
But then when I woke up from my dream, I would say maybe 2-2.
Yeah, that's more reasonable for sure.
Right? So, Kenyon, thank you for coming on, my man.
Appreciate it.
It's been a great conversation, okay? Skip and I really appreciate this. Where can you let them know, again, where to find you?
Hopeful Canadian, or, if you're a troublemaker on the group, you'll hear from me.
Dude, I could go through names on that group that we're on. Anyway.
It's okay.
I know, right? You guys go down there, click subscribe, click like. You guys go find Simon on Dougie J's at simonbroder.com, amazon.ca. Go buy the book. You guys can find me at King Hussein on all social media platforms. You guys can find us. We actually made a comeback on our Instagram and our Twitter. Twitter to the Point Raps, Instagram and Facebook to the Point. You guys watching us right now out there on YouTube, go click subscribe, go click like. Let us know what you think. Leave some comments. Tell Kenyon how much you love him as much as we love him. Okay. And if y'all got
Thank you
something
for having me, by the way. Thank you so much.
Man, it's a pleasure, man. You know our boy out there, and I'm going to say his name because I know he watches it. James Welch. Okay. He's the one that introduced us. So shout out to you, my man. This has been nothing but a pleasure. On behalf of myself, Kenyon, and Skip, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, and
peace.